Donut Media is one of the largest automotive production companies in the world. Their main YouTube channel has over 9 million subscribers, plus they've also got a reaction channel, a podcast channel, and I think they might even have their own app now. It isn't going to do deep dives into topics like you would see on other channels. They are targeting the casual viewer and providing some information on cars in an entertaining way. Getting mad at Donut for not discussing all the additives in gasoline during a video about why gas prices vary so much would be like getting mad at the Magic School Bus for not discussing individual immune cells in the episode talking about the immune system. It glosses over the detail of all the different types of immune cells in order to focus on the bigger picture of how immune cells fight infections. However, I can't stand by while a company that portrays itself as an authority on automotive topics spreads blatant misinformation for views. The video I'm talking about is titled, "Why Are Trucks So Big?" And I could tell when I saw that thumbnail that I was going to have to make a video about this. This video was released on April 12th, 2025. Now, the title itself is a valid question. Why are trucks so big? Trucks are getting bigger. And I'm actually working on a video right now about why America doesn't have small trucks. I'm doing a deep dive into all the reasons why America doesn't have good options for small, affordable pickup trucks. Not just the main ones that everybody else on the platform talks about. Unfortunately, I've been really busy at work the past few months, so that video is not done yet. So, for this Donut Media video, I like the title. There's nothing wrong with that, because it is a sentiment that a lot of people are feeling and is objectively true. My problem begins with the thumbnail. They show the side view of a 1980s Toyota pickup in front of a brand new Chevy 2500, and the text above the truck says, "What happened?" As you might guess from the thumbnail, the video starts with them comparing the sizes of these trucks. The general premise is, trucks today are huge compared to old trucks, even though the bed size remains the same. If you've seen my video on K-trucks and the recent effort to ban them, you know that I'm a scientist and I can't stand when people use flawed tests or cherry-picked data in order to further their agenda. And that's exactly what's going on here. On the one hand, they aren't using this video to lobby to states' DMVs to ban large pickup trucks, so they're already better than the AAMV. But on the other hand, I would expect more out of a company that is supposed to be made up of people who like and care about cars. When the IIHS did a crash test comparing a Ford Ranger to a neighborhood vehicle and called it a K-truck, I could forgive them, as the K-truck and the low-speed neighborhood vehicle, whatever you want to call it, they look similar on the outside. And the Ford Ranger was considered a small pickup. So in that case, it was possible that the misrepresentation of the results and what the test actually proves was accidental. However, in this case, I would expect a channel of this size that presents itself as being a source of information on cars to do a little fact-checking and make a better comparison. It would actually drive home their point better if they had an apt comparison. So, what do they do wrong in their comparison?
This is a truck from the 1980s. And that's a brand new truck.
First, they simply say, this is a truck from the 1980s, this is a brand new truck. Not once in their intro do they acknowledge that these trucks are different brands and weight classes. Now, they don't outright say that these trucks are the same model, and they don't try to obscure what make and model these trucks are. But not outright mentioning it could lead someone to assume that the Toyota pickup is about the same size, or in other words, representative of the size of any pickup from the 1980s, and that is just not true. Obviously, these trucks were chosen primarily so that they could make a catchy thumbnail, and a strong secondary factor being that they could get both of these trucks. But making that comparison without clearly stating the other differences between these trucks is at best a bit misleading. So, why do these differences make a difference? The first reason is the Toyota pickup is not a full-size truck. It was never a full-size truck. While classifications like small or mid-size have been used to classify trucks, and their definitions have sort of changed over time, I'll stick with weight classification. And even though weight classification is kind of a moot point now, it does get us in the ballpark. Small trucks are quarter-ton trucks, 1/4 ton. That originally referred to their payload capacity. A 1-ton truck could carry 1 ton of payload, and a half-ton truck could carry a half-ton, a quarter-ton truck could carry 1/4 ton payload. Of course, companies always battle to be the biggest, baddest truck and be able to haul the most and tow the most, and so a lot of times the actual payload capacity was higher than that number. The payload ratings have quickly ballooned, and so now a 1-ton truck could carry up to 2 tons. Of course, even back in the day, competing for government contracts, the payload rating system didn't hold up then either. For example, my 2.5-ton truck, my Rio M35, can actually hold 10,000 pounds or 5 tons of payload. Of course, that is the highway payload, and the cross-country payload rating is closer to 2.5 tons, so maybe that's what they were referring to when the Army ordered 2.5-ton trucks. Either way, the half-ton truck was what people considered a full-size pickup truck. They are your F-150, your Chevy or Dodge 1500s, your Nissan Titan, and your Toyota Tundra. It is important to remember that Toyota didn't sell a full-size pickup in the US until 1993 with the T100. Before that, even though the 1983 Toyota pickup had a cargo capacity of 1/2 ton, it was not considered a half-ton or full-size pickup. The Chevy C1500 of the era could carry close to 1 ton. So, one truck in the comparison was a 1/4 ton truck. The other truck was not a half-ton, it was a 3/4 ton. That is 2 weight classes up. And for most manufacturers, the 3/4 ton and 1 ton trucks share the same platform. So it is roughly going to be the same size as a similar spec 1 ton truck. That is 3 weight classes difference between the two. Now, trucks have generally gotten larger over time. So this flawed comparison doesn't completely misrepresent the data, but it does blow those changes out of proportion. The first thing they comment on after the size comparison is the utility aspect. And to show that, they just take the measurement of the bed length. And they're like, wow, this truck is so much bigger and longer and wider, but the bed length is only slightly longer.
Over 5 feet longer, 20 inches wider,
Yep.
and 10 inches taller.
Jeez. Dude, this guy's a unit.
So despite this thing being an absolute behemoth, the bed, the thing that trucks are kind of defined by, is only about 5 inches longer.
Except they fail to talk about how the Toyota is an extended cab. I don't think that model even has seats in the back. If it does, it just has 2 small jump seats. However, the 2500 they test is a crew cab. Not just an extended cab, a crew cab. So it has the full back seats with the extra legroom and the extra long doors. Extended cab models of half-ton trucks have always had more room in the back seat and room in the front seat and cab as well than quarter-ton trucks. Just look at the Ford F-150 versus the Ford Ranger in the 90s. Same era, but the half-ton is going to be much bigger, and the extended cab half-ton has a lot more room for the back seat than the extended cab Ford Ranger. That's another reason why this comparison is so disingenuous. You're comparing apples to oranges. How can you talk about the difference in utility without talking about the difference in the number of seats, as well as the payload capacity in weight and the towing capacity? Now, if they were to pull up some figures on trucks being sold and compare the average overall length of trucks sold now versus those sold in the 80s, they probably would still see the same trend of trucks on average getting bigger with even smaller beds. It used to be that you could not get a truck with a bed shorter than 6 feet. The standard was about 6.5 feet, and 8-foot beds were very common. Nowadays, you're lucky to find a truck with a 6-foot bed. And if you want an 8-foot bed, you pretty much are limited to the 3/4 ton or 1 ton trucks. And there's even trucks out there with 4-foot beds. The reason is most people want a crew cab, or at least an extended cab. It does make sense. If this is going to be your only vehicle, you want to be able to take passengers if you have to, and you want them to be comfortable. Gone are the days where you can have people ride in the bed of the truck, so now you really need those extra seats. Also, trucks are wider and longer, even if you compare the exact same truck. That would have really been good to show. If they had compared an extended cab Ram 2500, one from the 90s, a second gen, and one from today, they would have really easily been able to point out how those things have changed, and the comparison would have been a lot more fair. Another thing I didn't like about this video is they don't actually go into why the trucks are bigger today. They talk about like how it makes people feel safe and whatnot, but of course part of the answer is passenger comfort. Cabs are getting bigger, especially the extended cab and crew cab, in order to give people more legroom. However, that's only a couple inches. The other major part of the reason why trucks are so long is the front and rear mandatory crumple zones, shock absorbing bumpers. Have you ever wondered why the engine sits so far back in the engine bay? It's because you have to have dead space where the frame can collapse on itself. Another reason why trucks are bigger and especially heavier now is all the electronics and such. Some of it is optional features to make the truck more appealing. The tailgates in modern trucks are thicker because they have locks in them. They have shock absorbers so they go down smooth. Sometimes they even have backup cameras, sensors, extra lights, doodads, power assistance, everything. Even just finding room for all the emission stuff under the hood can be challenging. So they make the vehicle bigger. This is not just a problem with trucks. Look at the Honda Civic over the years. Cars of all sizes are getting bigger and especially heavier. However, I'm not too worried about the size of trucks getting out of control because there is an upper limit, both in the width as well as the length of the trucks. A standard lane is about 12 feet wide. Typically, if your vehicle is larger than 12 feet wide, you need to have a wide load permit, and you need to have the signage, and you need to have a vehicle in front of you. So 12 feet is the maximum width that you're going to see trucks. They are not going to get wider than 12 feet unless we have a major redesign of all of the roads in America. Parking spaces as well. Most parking spaces are 12 feet wide. I have seen places where the parking spaces are only 8 or 10 feet wide, and it's been very annoying, even when I was driving a small car. However, the majority of places, they're going to have 12-foot wide parking stalls. So you have to be under 12 feet wide in order to park within the lines. Length is also a limiting factor from a practical sense. You need to be able to park without sticking the back end of the truck out. Because of this, I don't see this trend of trucks growing as something that will continue. They will hit their upper limit unless there is major infrastructure change. In fact, I think they have hit their upper limit. I don't see those international super trucks all over the road, so clearly most Americans have limits. The next thing they critique is grille dimensions, which have also been getting larger. To examine this, they first take a tape measure and they measure the height from the ground to the top of the hood on a brand new 3/4 ton truck. It measures 53 inches. How much did the 1983 Toyota pickup measure? Unknown. They never measured it. Instead, they compare it to a modern Lexus, although they don't actually measure that one either. Of course, if they had measured the Toyota pickup, that would have also been an issue because the Toyota pickup had been modified. It had a lift kit.
Bigger, taller cars has meant bigger, taller grills. This grill right here is 53 inches. I mean, I'm 6'5" and this thing almost comes up to my shoulder. If I get hit by this, I'm either going through the front end or under this thing. As opposed to cars like sedans and coupes, where the lower profile, the slanted front end, if I get hit here, I'm going over and I'm dissipating my energy over the front end of the car.
They then do a demonstration of the usual pedestrian safety concerns in a somewhat sensationalized manner. If they had done an actual measurement of the frontward visibility on some of the different trucks, or if they had measured from the ground to the point of first impact, which is a more important measure when it comes to pedestrian safety, if they had compared a modern Ram 2500 to an old Ram 2500 second gen, it still would have been visually striking for the video and also much more relatable. Another thing I don't like is that entire section, they do exactly what the mainstream media does.
Man, I really hope there's not a herd of school kids right here. It looks clear. Is everything okay? Is there something in front of me?
You can't see a single one of those?
No, I don't see any heads. All right, off we go. Just another day in Inglewood. Whoops.
Ooh, big truck kill small child, truck bad, without any kind of discussion on the reason why the truck is the way it is. I expect better from an automotive channel. A quick Google search reveals some possible reasons, although I can't confirm which of these, if any, play a role. The first one is increased cooling capacity. As these trucks get more towing and payload capacity, they need to cool off. Also, all those emissions systems and computer modules that need to be insulated means that heat loss radiating from the engine block and the headers and everything is more stifled. So the radiator becomes more and more important, and it's actually getting bigger and bigger. This seems like a very likely reason to me, as the radiator in my 2011 Ram 1500 is much bigger than all the second-gen radiators that I had lying around growing up. And we know that things like catalytic converters, exhaust gas recirculation, and anything that's crowding the engine bay is going to keep the heat in. You can even see cars like Toyota Camrys have bigger grills now. I saw the masculinity angle posted by a few sites online, including one particularly inflammatory article in The Drive. They claim that the grille is a prominent feature of the design of these trucks. I'm sure the design language has some influence on the size and shape of the grills and the front of the truck, but it's hard to tell how much form follows function. Also, the aforementioned Toyota grills, along with other grills in newer cars, shows that it's not really about trucks. It's a trend with many newer cars, and trucks are just the largest example. Another possible cause for the state of the truck grille currently is, ironically, pedestrian safety. The front of cars is highly regulated, from crumple zones to crash-absorbing bumpers. Also, the height and thickness of bumpers is regulated by the US government. For example, pop-up headlights aren't allowed anymore because you can't have sharp corners that could snag clothing on pedestrians that are struck. Additionally, there is a very standard height to first impact. If the point of initial impact is too low, you will hit the pedestrian at or below the knee, and the pedestrian will actually get launched over top of the car. Or if you're in a vehicle accident and there's a mismatch between the point of first impact between two vehicles, what you can have happen is this vehicle will drive over the top of this vehicle. So it's actually a standard to have the point of first impact the same for all vehicles, regardless of their ride height. So for something that is tall, like this van here, it's going to have a bumper that extends down and stick out right there, so that the point of first impact is right maybe closer to here. And the sports car is going to have a much higher nose. If the point of impact is too high, you would have the opposite problem. Instead of launching over the top, what would happen is the pedestrian would get sucked under the wheels. Now, you can imagine that truck builders are in a bit of a predicament. They have to have low bumpers, but if they hang the bumper too low, it'll hang up on things. Not to mention that people want more ground clearance, especially when they add in a bunch of extra sensors and stuff. So now the bumper has to be lower to comply with pedestrian safety requirements, but that grille also has to be taller to have that larger radiator. And you can't really do much about that unless you were to mount the radiator on top of the engine like on a Humvee. I really wish I had access to a second gen Ram that doesn't have a sagging front end so that I could show you a comparison with my 2011. But based on pictures, and especially when you see a 4th gen bumper on a 2nd gen Ram, it appears that both the grille is larger on the newer trucks and the bumper is larger. Also, if memory serves, and I don't really have good videos or pictures of this, but from what I recall, on a 2nd gen, that radiator extends down below to where the bumper is. So half of the radiator, or part of the radiator, is now hidden behind the bumper. So that's not very efficient for cooling. Having a taller grille means you can lift the radiator up and not have as much of it covered by the bumper. Another factor that, once again, I can't find any data for, but it seems like factory ride height in the trucks has gotten taller. I wish I could find some numbers on this, like sales data, but just from what I see, it seems like there's more stock lifts, and maybe even a bone stock ride height is taller. There's a long history of trucks with stock lifts, but nowadays it seems like every truck needs running boards. I know my 2011 Ram has a 2 or 3 inch lift and 33s from the factory, which isn't completely unheard of. Ford had the highboy trim in the 1970s, but I feel like the sport trim didn't used to have a lift. I don't know whether factory lifts are more popular now, if there's more trim levels that have factory lifts, or if the stock ride height has changed. I wouldn't be surprised if what is considered stock ride height has changed due to consumer preferences or possibly some engineering concerns. Imagine all those sensors and electronics, and you really want to keep them up out of the way. Anyway, it's entirely possible that the big bumper might be because the ride height is increasing, but that point of first impact has to remain the same. Whatever the real reason behind the large front ends of trucks nowadays, I would think that Donut could put their vast resources of writing staff that can research stuff, connections in the car industry, and get some behind the scenes from the engineers, or maybe even some sales data. At the very least, you would think that they would be able to get more trucks to look at and have better comparisons. They could have also done more to measure driver visibility in the new trucks versus old trucks, instead of just going, ha ha, run over small child. Pedestrian safety is a good topic to cover, but this feels more like a hit piece you'd see on BuzzFeed than an informative investigation conducted by people who like cars. It provided almost no insight into the problem, it just made jokes. Of course, I might have been willing to let that slide if they hadn't done that misleading, clickbaity comparison in the beginning. This 1-2 punch makes the whole thing seem very disingenuous. Then we get to the part where they actually tell us the reason why trucks are so big now.
Why did trucks get so big? Well, this is the part where I finally tell you.
Their boogeyman? The CAFE Standards Act. More specifically, they blame car company lobbying for the loopholes and big market budgets for selling Americans on the lie that they need those bigger trucks. That sounds like a line Vox would say. The critiques brought up in the video are valid, but the presentation once again sensationalizes the issue and misses out on some key facts. Their description of the CAFE standard is pretty accurate. It doesn't provide targets for individual vehicles, but instead enforces fleet averages based on class. So there's an average number for all the vehicles a company sells, but there's actually different averages for different classes or different types of vehicles. Specifically, there's a car standard and a light truck standard. Interestingly, they classify light trucks as cargo vehicles with a gross vehicle weight rating 8,500 pounds or under, and now passenger vehicles with a gross weight of 10,000 pounds or under. It's also slightly more complicated now because this standard now also factors in vehicle footprints, which they do discuss a bit. However, from what I was able to glean in the law, and I'm no lawyer, is that the 8,500 pound rule is still in place. The restrictions taking into account vehicle footprint do not apply to vehicles with gross weights more than 8,500 pounds. CAFE Standards Act. What we need to know is that it applies to light trucks smaller than or equal to 8,500 pounds. And that is gross vehicle weight rating. And then it applies to cars as well. And we don't have to worry too much about the footprint part of it. Basically what it'll do is it'll take the wheelbase and track width, and then it will apply that along with the weight. For vehicles within that weight class, it'll apply that wheelbase and track width, and that will be used to curve the grading for the fuel economy. So what is the gross weight of a brand new Silverado 2500 that they examine? 9,900 pounds. This means that one of the trucks in their comparison doesn't even fall under CAFE standards. So no, it doesn't keep getting bigger in order to take advantage of the footprint-dependent brakes in CAFE standards. Additionally, footprint measurements takes into account only wheelbase and track width, so it has nothing to do with the grills getting larger, which is what they spent about half the video complaining about. So, the CAFE Standards Act does incentivize companies like Ford to sell more of their Super Duty trucks because they don't count against them for average fuel economy. However, the CAFE is not responsible for the size of the 2500 changing over time. Also, the CAFE standard has only one class called light truck, which covers all quarter-ton and half-ton, and yes, some older 3/4 ton trucks also fell into this category. Therefore, CAFE standards, at least the pre-2008 footprint reform, are not responsible for killing the small pickup. It may be, at least in part, responsible for increasing the weight of the 3/4 ton, but considering how much all the trucks have increased in weight, and the 3/4 ton was on that 8,500 pound borderline to begin with, I wouldn't say that it's some big conspiracy. Do you want to know why cars have increased in weight? It's the increased complexity with both mandatory and optional features, safety features, sensors, emissions, etc. That is the reason why trucks and vehicles in general have gotten more expensive and have gotten heavier. The next part of the video talks about the cost difference between the two trucks. And I find it really funny that they're complaining about how trucks are way too expensive nowadays, right after they cut away from saying that that they can't believe that the new truck didn't have any sensors or cameras on the front.
This truck does not come with a front camera. It's not like we're just avoiding it. There are literally no sensors on the front of this truck. You can buy a truck this big without any extra safety equipment on it. The other thing is Jimmy is sitting in the seating position. There is no up on this chair. This is a tilt mechanism, and then it has a back and forth. Those are the only things you can do with this chair.
So they're testing a base model truck. They're complaining about how expensive it is. And then they're complaining that it doesn't have extra features on top of that, which would naturally make it, anyone? More expensive. I also don't like their very surface level critique of new truck prices. All they do is say that in 2018, the average truck price was $48,000. And today, the average truck price has gone up to $60,000. While that is a staggering number, it doesn't tell you the full story. The average tells you what people are spending on their trucks, but I want to see the full gambit of price range. In 2018, a Chevy Silverado 1500 work trim, which is their base model, regular cab, regular bed, V6 auto 2-wheel drive, which I will be calling a base spec. It's the lowest possible option point. Cost only $28,000. Today, that same truck would cost you $37,000. The most up-trimmed 2018 Chevy truck had an MSRP of $56,000. Now, you could add some options on top of that, but really you're not getting much above $60,000. However, a top-end truck today has a base MSRP of $64,000 for the luxury version. If you want the top off-road truck, which would be Chevy's version of the Raptor, that has a base MSRP of $72,000, and the top options package runs you another $14,000. So you are looking at $86,000, from $60,000 to $86,000. My truck that I just picked up from auction is a 2011 Ram 1500 Sport Quad Cab with almost every option added, including a heater block. From what I could find online, the MSRP of my exact truck would have been $44,000. I tried to option a similar truck today, but the option scheme has changed at Ram, so I can't get the exact same truck, but getting as close as I could, it was a Ram 1500 Texas Edition with the Bighorn luxury package, trailer towing package, off-road package, 392 gears, and an engine block heater. The MSRP was $54,000. It cost 10 grand more for the truck, and I only got 18-inch wheels instead of 20-inch wheels. That's because that's what the off-road package comes with. It also wouldn't let me get leather seats, so I've got cloth bucket seats, and I optioned the twin-turbo inline-6 engine because they don't have the Hemi anymore, although that inline-6 I have really high hopes for. I really love inline 6-cylinder engines, and so if this proves to be very reliable in the long term, I say that it's a win. So all across the board, whether you're getting a base model truck or a top-of-the-line, blinged-out luxury monstrosities, you're paying 10 to 20 grand more than what you would have 5 years ago. I would have loved if they had talked about how, even accounting for inflation, the trucks of today, and all cars in general, are more expensive than they used to be. I recently saw Donut compare inflation-adjusted MSRP of a 1969 Dodge Charger to the new Charger Daytona, so they clearly have the ability to do that, so why didn't they? Motor Trend did the math comparing the inflation-adjusted MSRP of an old Toyota pickup to the new Toyota Tacoma, and found that the old Toyota pickup would be significantly cheaper than the new one. The differences would only be amplified with the American trucks. I did some searching for my video on small trucks, and the absolute cheapest new truck you can get is a Ford Maverick base model for around $30,000. Unfortunately for Steve Earle, the days of the $20,000 pickup truck are long gone. The Donut Media video ends in a pointless tug of war that they themselves even say is pointless.
Was this test pointless? Absolutely.
So why did you do it? It wasn't that funny. I do like the ending sentiment. So there is one redeeming factor in this video. Even though trucks have gotten bigger, they haven't necessarily gotten better, especially when it comes to reliability. As trucks have gotten heavier, more complicated, and more expensive, they've also gotten less rugged and less reliable. That's my major problem with the modern pickup truck. The auto industry, especially around the truck market, does need a hard look. And some serious critique does have the ability to make a difference. Unfortunately, this Donut Media video does not provide that. And that is my major problem with this video. I really hope we see something better from them in the future. Because, as I said before, they do have the ability to do very well-researched, critical videos analyzing car topics and presenting that to a more widespread general audience. And I think that if they brought up these issues and seriously considered them and looked into them, they could spark some change in the automotive industry. So really, I just see this video as a huge missed opportunity. If you made it this far in the video and haven't gotten tired of me ranting, then you would really like this video here on K-trucks and the recent effort by several states to ban them. If you like pickup trucks, this video, I bought a pickup truck at an auction, and at the time I was really excited and thought I got a really good deal. I was much happier then. Those are simpler times. Back before, well, let's just say, keep an eye out on a future video on that pickup truck, and you'll realize why I was able to get such a good deal on it.